Hi, everybody. We are back. This is Creativity is the Cure. I am Malcolm Moore, and today I've got a really, really special guest. I've got my older son, Django Moore. How are you doing, Django?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm in Los Angeles today, and Django actually lives in Tualatin, Oregon. How long have you lived there for?
So I moved here about halfway through 2019, so just about 5 years, a little over 5 years now.
Yeah, and what do you like about living there? I mean, you and I both grew up in Rochester, New York, and then we all moved to California. How did you end up in Oregon?
Yeah, so I was in California for years on and off while going to college in New York and back. And after living on my own for a bit in California, I began long-distance dating my girlfriend that I have of several years now, and I visited Oregon, and I loved it so much here. I kind of just packed up my stuff and left eventually. I mean, I do love Los Angeles, but I love all of the nature and hiking spots and things to do out here.
Yeah, and you get quite a bit more seasons than we do. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, if you go up north, definitely a little bit of snow. We get some ice here, which you guys definitely do not.
Yeah, not in the 11 years that I've been here. I've not seen that yet. Although they do have fake snow at the Grove, which I was confused and tricked by at one point.
Yeah.
So in case people don't know Django, I have him here under 3 types of things: veterinary assistant, gamer, and sports enthusiast. Tell me about being a veterinary assistant. How does it inspire you? How did you get into it? What do you like about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I've always been a huge animal lover my entire life, and growing up, you always had plenty of cats around, so that definitely jump-started things, I think.
Yeah.
Good eight or so cats over the course of the years before I graduated and moved out.
Yeah, and I think across our extended family, pretty much everybody has cats now.
Yeah.
We just came from your brother's house. He's got 2 cats. How many cats do you guys have?
Just one. We just have one at the moment.
Tell everybody his name. He's got a pretty cool name.
My cat's name is Shikamaru. It's from Naruto. It's my favorite character from the show, and he is about a year and a half now. We got him when he was about 7 weeks old, and he actually shares a birthday with you.
What are the chances?
Yeah.
So how did you end up being a veterinary assistant?
Well, so I was in between jobs about 2 years ago, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I was a little stumped and looking around, and something that really sparked my interest and idea-wise what I wanted to do was just thinking about how much I love animals and how much I enjoyed in high school doing my senior project I worked at a humane shelter and a animal shelter for rescues, and I really enjoyed working there and how rewarding it was giving back to that community and to the animals. And so on a whim, I actually just volunteered to kind of start at the bottom and be almost like a janitor, not quite, but you start at the bottom as a kennel assistant, and I've worked my way up all the way to vet assistant / vet tech. So pretty cool. And to answer your question earlier as well about inspiration, as a huge animal lover, I am very grateful to be able to do what I do for a living. I think that being able to meet and help so many cats and dogs on a daily basis is definitely great, and it's a constant learning experience for me. I would definitely also say that plenty of inspiration comes from helping care and treat for animals, and inspiration to do good things and help people out as well.
Yeah. I definitely admire you for the work you do. You know that I love animals, but the things that you do there and the patience you have and the situations you deal with, I don't know how you do it. By the way, what kind of animals do you guys see at work? I can take a guess, but I think you've told me there's been some unexpected visitors from time to time.
Yeah, well, so I work at an animal hospital, and they're walk-in, so it is... Every now and then we get a bit of a wild card situation, but for the most part, it's dogs and cats primarily. Every now and then we will get rats, gerbils, hamsters, guinea pigs, and there was at one point a client who would come in with their dogs who lived on a ranch / farmland, and they would bring in a baby goat that we got to kind of pass around and hold, which was really cute.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if we explained it yet, but this is called Creativity is the Cure. So A lot of people think that creativity is only like drawing and making music, dancing, things like that. But what I'm really interested in is how do people use that part of their brain during their regular lives and their job? So if you think about it, how would you use creativity when you work with the animals at the vet?
I definitely think that the job requires a lot of creativity as far as, I would say, fast thinking and thinking on the go.
Stream of consciousness type of thing?
Right, yeah. I mean, it definitely is a very fun and rewarding job, but at times there are, not quite scary, but there are some high-stress moments where you definitely have to think outside of the box. I mean, every animal's different. Especially cats, as much as you and I both do love cats, dogs are a bit more predictable in nature. And then, every single day there's a cat that really throws me out of the loop, and I have to kind of think about how to deal with them. And they're not quite like any of the other cats that I've dealt with that day. There's always one crazy animal that you really just have to think, okay, what else can I try here to get this done?
And let's be honest, that's one of the reasons why you and I like cats. They're very devious.
Yeah, very, very mischievous and very, very interesting characters.
Devious and mischievous. Can you give me an example of a challenging situation where you had to use creativity with one of the animals at work?
Well, I definitely think that a lot of it comes into play when I have to, whether I'm doing vaccines or nail trims or I'm the person restraining, it definitely requires a lot of outside of the box thinking there. But
is that because every cat is different?
Every cat, I mean, a lot of different dogs. I think a good example is there's a Great Dane that is probably taller than me if they were to stand up that comes in, and I'm 6'1", so pretty big dog.
Right.
And they come in about once a month for nail trims or vaccines, and the dog is pretty nice, but every now and then they are sick of what we're doing. They try to buck like a horse kind of out of someone holding them.
Right.
And, I'm 6'1" and I'm on the ground holding the dog, and they're taller than me a little bit at that point.
So you're saying on some days it can be kind of like World Federation Wrestling. Like you might be put in a camel clutch by a poodle.
There have been many times where I've been dragged a little bit or thrown to the ground. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
I thought you were going to say dragged to the curb. That would be good too.
No, but definitely a lot of dogs that feels like I'm the one being walked. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, I know you're a nature lover, but I also know you have something in common with Christopher Walken, and that is that you don't drive a car. Is that true?
Yeah, not against driving cars. I just never learned, I guess, and I've always found it pretty easy to walk. I really enjoy walking. I don't mind walking long distances, so I've always found ways to do that or take public transportation.
All right. With that in mind, though, you have told me stories of a mystical creature that you sometimes see on the way home, on your walk home, and I believe this creature is called a Nutria. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What are they like? What are they like? Describe it to our listeners.
Nutria are very interesting, kind of like a mix between a rat and a beaver appearance-wise, I would say. They're very interesting and they are kind of cool, but they're also an incredibly invasive species, and they're known out here for having destructive burrowing and feeding habits. They do reside kind of anywhere with tall grass or vegetation or water around here, so I do see them quite often. And
do they see you? Are they aware when you walk by? Do they like squint their eyes at you or wink or anything?
They do not do much. I think they're either used to being around people or being fed, because they'll just stand there and go about their business. They don't care. But I've done some research on them because I thought they were interesting. I had never seen them before moving here. They're found mostly in the Pacific Northwest region out here, but they are originally native to South America and were introduced over time to Europe and Asia by fur farmers and traders, and then came over here. Not from here and very invasive, but they are very cool to look at. Kind of gross, but kind of cool.
All right, so let's go way, way back in time. What is your first memory of using any kind of your creativity skills?
I think I would have to say that my first memory of using creativity would probably be getting the opportunity as a small child to experiment and mess around on instruments with you.
Oh, that's
I definitely recall. I recall trying out percussion instruments and drum sets, keyboards. You had all sorts of really cool sampling machines when I was a kid.
That's right. I remember sampling your voice. That was awesome.
Yeah, a lot of those were really fun, and you'd let me try them, which was really cool. And I do also specifically remember loving those little egg shakers that you had.
Ah, yes. I still use those as a teacher. Those are awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So have you ever used creativity to solve any challenges in your life, like a serious challenge? Think about it. Have you ever used that part of your brain to do that?
Yeah, I pretty much on a daily basis. In fact, I mean, I would say whether I'm home or at work or out and about and just doing stuff, creativity and inspiration is definitely something I'm utilizing, whether I realize it in the moment or not. I mean, when dealing with difficult or impatient, upset animals at work, I definitely have to get creative in my methods in the moment, like we spoke about.
Yeah.
Also, making sure people are safe and able to do their job at work is a big thing, too, while dealing with those animals. So that definitely requires a lot of that.
I imagine as at your job, helping the animals, you're kind of like the Terminator. You're probably seeing 3 or 4 multiple choice things, and you're going through them to see what the right answer is.
Right.
Is it kind of like that?
It's like a choose your own adventure book. If you choose to restrain the dog, turn to page 56.
Or access denied.
Or yes, you are dead.
Okay, who's the most creative musical artist that you currently enjoy listening to, and why?
It's a hard one. There are definitely a lot of there are plenty of musical artists that I listen to that I love, and they're wildly creative. Probably hard to narrow them down to just one, but if I had to just pick one at the moment in terms of their overall discography, I might have to say Kendrick Lamar as far as a lyricist.
Great choice.
I would say he's pretty high up on the list there as far as for his lyricism, writing skills. He definitely uses a lot of creativity, and as someone who likes a lot of rap and hip-hop over the decades of the history of that kind of music, I do really appreciate he has a wonderful ability to flow over anything in terms of his breath control and his capability.
He's got a really unique cadence.
Yeah, I do think he's not only a phenomenal performer. We both saw him years ago together. But,
that was wild. Yeah, that was a great concert.
He's a great entertainer and performer, but he's able to also be a crafty and witty wordsmith who's able to kind of paint a vivid picture with his lyrics. And I appreciate someone who does that as opposed to, say someone who's just doing it for the pop star type of deal.
Right, and I think looking back at that show we saw, one thing that makes him stand apart from other rappers and also have something in common with Mutant Ninja Turtles, that if I remember correctly, he did battle ninjas at one point during the show. Is that correct?
Yeah. There was the Damn Tour, I believe, in 2016 or 2017, back when it was called the Staples Center and not the Crypto.com Arena.
The Crypt, yeah.
Really rolls off the tongue. But yeah, that was a great show, and he had all sorts of choreographed dancers. There were like dancers and martial artists that came out in the background, pyrotechnics, really cool.
And do I remember correctly also that I think the opening act was the now popular Travis Scott? Is that correct?
Yeah, he opened as well. I do remember.
And that was the time where he was like on an eagle that was flying over the crowd or something like that, right?
Yeah. Some kind of suspended by harnesses, like a mechanical eagle that kind of moved over the crowd as he was jumping up and down and rapping. Very, very interesting.
That alone I admire. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
What is the most creative film or TV puppet show about animals that you have ever seen? I know you and I, even as a grown man at 54, I still watch kids shows.
Oh, yeah.
But for you and I, like growing up or what you like now, what's the most creative puppet show that you can remember?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I still do. I'm about to turn 30 here, and I do still love to wake up and eat cereal and watch cartoons.
Excellent combination.
But that's a really hard one. Do you mind if I give you my top three?
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
There's too many good options to give one answer, but I do have to say, from my childhood until now, I would probably have to say the Henson show Dinosaurs, which you introduced me to, and I really loved growing up. And
that's a great one, yeah.
Still great to rewatch. The writing and the humor has aged amazing.
Totally agreed. What else?
I would also have to go with another good Henson one, Bear in the Big Blue House.
Yeah, that one's great.
I definitely have really good memories of that as a child. And then third, I would have to also go with another good one from my childhood. It was on PBS, and it was called Between the Lions, and it was a perfect balance of good humor and good puppetry, but also it was really cool and educational for children.
Where do you think you get your creativity from? Do you think that your mom and I are creative? And do you think our creative identity was somehow passed on to you and your brother Caleb at all genetically? Do you see any similarities?
That's a good question. I do definitely think that both you and Mom are very creative in a lot of different ways. And I mean, you use creativity for music and being able to create and have fun with countless types of instruments. You teach children for a living to play music, which obviously requires quite a bit of that. Finding new ways to engage and teach your school students about music and music history, and your ability to write and use puppets and a lot of things I could list. So I definitely think you have a lot of that. And Mom as well is very creative, I would say, in ways she's very good at knowing all sorts of difficult computer work things and technological stuff that requires problem solving, efficiency, and knowledge that I definitely do not have.
I know. I think her creative ability with technology is completely blows my mind to the point that I probably only understand about 5% of what she does. But not only that, she really knows how to a great problem solver, especially when it comes to electronics and computers and practical situations.
Yeah, and I think too that I'm not sure 100% that genetics could play a role in creativity in families, but I do know that growing up around people who used creativity in all kinds of ways absolutely led to learning different ways to be creative in problem solving and all kinds of skills. Due to experience, watching and learning from you guys and picking up things over time. Caleb and I both have become creative adults in our own different ways, and I would like to think that a lot of it comes in part from being around you guys and kind of latching on to different methods and things that you were doing.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think that, all families, especially the creativity component of them, spreads across the generations, and you see it kind of warp and appear and change over the years and the different generations.
Yeah.
Do you think that creativity needs to be implemented in supporting people with mental health struggles like depression or anxiety? Any specific insight? Do you think people could be helped to further discover their creative abilities?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I as someone who has dealt on my own personally with mental health often throughout different stages of my life, and someone who advocates for more mental health support and options in today's world and society, I definitely do think that creativity should be implemented a lot more in supporting and helping people with their struggles.
In what way do you think it helps them? Is it more of like an escape mechanism to give their brain a break, or are there other ways that it helps?
I think that definitely is a big role in some of the ways that they help, but there are a lot of options out there that I think they have done a good job in society slowly coming up with different ways that match all sorts of people's needs.
Right.
While I am glad that things are done being helped to study and help with such things, I do think there could be more outside of the box thinking and creative ideas being brainstormed to try and figure out more efficient ways to help people on a daily basis, and things that cater to everyone's different personality or things that they're dealing with specifically.
Right, and I think I have seen over time people that are struggling with different types of anxiety or depression or things like that. Sometimes if they take up a new skill like painting or drawing or writing a song or learning an instrument, not only does it give them a break, but I think over time it builds confidence because they have a new skill and they discover a part of themselves they never knew about. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that's very important for them to be able to support people in that way and have them kind of develop new skills or other ways to branch out and do things that they want to do and enjoy things and be creative and inspired, like you said.
Totally agreed. What form do you think or hope your creativity will take in the future? Any related hopes or dreams? I hear that you like to do voices and or impressions for your friends.
Yeah, there are many ideas and aspirations I've thought about as I get older, and they all are very much fueled at the core by creativity. I could definitely say that. I have always definitely loved making friends laugh by doing impressions and trying to figure out how to copy and mimic voices that I hear in film, animation, video games. And as someone who used to take voiceover lessons and workshops when I lived in Los Angeles, I still do very much have hopes of working in voiceover in any capacity someday, even if just a hobby. I did do that internship in high school as well at a local radio station. I do love talking and socializing around people, and I love music, conversation, film. So I do think voiceover, and as well, I've thought often about something I could see myself doing someday as being a talk show host or maybe a radio host or a DJ.
Your grandfather and I always thought that you would be a great sportscaster. You know so much about sports and you have a good voice to do that. Would you still be interested in that someday?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I pretty avidly still follow sports all the time, and I do appreciate and love those guys for what they do and their talent. That's definitely, I remember talking with my grandfather about that as a kid. He definitely thought I had the knack for that.
Tell us a little bit more about where did you work on a radio station and what station? And also after that, could you tell us about the voiceover lessons that you took here in California?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, towards the end of high school in upstate New York, where we lived at the time, I did an internship at a local alternative, independently funded radio station called WBER. It was
big college radio station.
Yeah, it was a really cool alternative radio station that kind of played a lot of stuff that I liked that was outside of the norm of all of the bigger radio stations in town. So I really appreciated being able to go there. Their library of albums, as well as just what they played, kind of blew me away because I was able to, you normally listen to one station for a certain kind of music, but they're playing Beastie Boys and then jumping to like something like Indigo Girls and then going back to whatever else. It's all over the place, and I really loved the fact that I was able to talk on there and learn from those guys and get a couple of requests in there too. And I did really appreciate being able to talk on the air and get that experience. It was very cool to do the whole, I got to do this is 90.5 FM WBER Rochester, the only station that matters. This is Django Moore.
Yeah, and I think that was great. I think I've got to remind our listeners, too, you're not that old, but this is quite a while ago, and there was no streaming. So everybody, you had to listen to the radio. That was one of the only ways to get music, right?
Yeah, I remember texting you and also my classmates because I got to skip a class to go do this. It was in the morning when it was scheduled, and so I was like, I texted my friend in chemistry, and I was like, tell the teacher to put on the radio. I'm going to be on. So it was really exciting. I
think I had dropped you off, and I went to a Starbucks, but I waited in the car till I could hear you.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool time. And the other thing you were asking about as well, the voiceover workshops and lessons I took. That was, I believe, in 2018 and 19. So about a year or two before I moved out here from LA. The first one I got to do was honestly one of the top experiences of my life. Very cool. I got to do a 1 month, once a week, I think it was about 2 hours, maybe a session with a small class of 10 to 12 people. It was a intensive voiceover program with Richard Horvitz. So he was...
Yeah, and
he was
tell everybody, what is he known for? I know he's done a lot of voices.
Yeah, so he was a big part of my childhood as far as things that I loved to watch growing up. He was known for Alpha 5, the droid at the command center in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He was Billy from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. He was one of the 2 Angry Beavers, I believe. He was
right there. That alone there. If you're one of the Angry Beavers.
I believe he's Daggett, yeah. And then he also is Zim from Invader Zim. So
wow. That's a lot. That's quite a bit.
I could probably name like 20 others that people who played video games or watched animation that grew up around my age or a little before or after know. So he's a legend in that field, and it was really cool not only to learn from him, but also I will say that I remember the first day you dropped me off, and I worked all day, and so I chugged a Starbucks double shot. And I'm already really anxious meeting one of my idols for the first time, and it's freezing when I get in the studio too.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting to perform, and there's like all these people around me watching too, and he calls me up to the mic, and it's just him on the other side of the booth, and everyone's watching me seated while I'm standing at the mic. And
no pressure.
And I'm hopped up on too much caffeine and overtired and freezing, and I was like shaking with excitement. It was crazy, but that was a really interesting and awesome experience to get to learn from him and kind of take script and copy and create our own characters and kind of get tips. I mean, I have a whole notebook still here that I filled out of just things I jotted down while he was talking. It was a really cool experience. I definitely highly recommend. Great teacher, really nice guy. Someone else I took that class with, funny enough, his name is Craig Lee Thomas. He ended up reaching out to me afterwards and said, hey, I've been acting since I was a kid, did theater, and I've done commercial voice work and some stuff. I'm teaching a commercial voiceover class separately in Burbank. Would you like to take it? And so I remember I talked to you a little bit about it, and I was interested, so we signed up, and that was really cool because it was a whole different aspect inside of that world. I mean, that was more focused on, for example, he had done things for McDonald's ads or Taco Bell or big corporate things like that. So actually being on the radio and the guy that's like, hey, McDonald's new, blah, 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 blah. And, you're getting to be in the booth, but it's a whole different kind of take that they're looking for.
Right, so instead of being like diverse voices and humor and acting and stuff like this was a little more traditional, right? Right.
That, or they're looking for a specific kind of voice or the way that you're saying things and enunciating certain words. They're kind of looking for, there's different focus on it depending on the script and the company and who they're catering towards. So that was really cool. And funny enough, in fact, he has gone on to do quite a bit of things in voice acting. He now has been in a really cool Square Enix game I like called Octopath Traveler 2 as a character. He got to be one of the pilots in Star Wars Squadrons, which is a really cool starfighter pilot video game that came out a few years ago. And he was just a big role in the intro for a big shooter game that just came out called Helldivers 2. So he was a great teacher, and I'm really happy to see him still keep that going, and he's been getting a lot of work. So it's really cool to learn from a couple of people that have so much experience in that field.
Yeah, those are really good experiences that you had. Going back to the class before that, do I remember, wasn't there a woman in your class who was a pretty well-known actress?
Yeah, so the commercial voiceover intensive class with Craig was, some of it was solo, but it was a small group, and we did have group/partner activities where you would have to go into the booth together and each do a character and kind of feed off of each other back and forth. And at one point, I ended up working with this really nice woman named Katie Featherston, and sounded like an actor name. Featherston sounds very fancy, very professional. But she was really nice, and they were kind of talking to her at one point about her having worked in the field. And so I went home one day and just for the hell of it, I looked her up, and she is the main actress in the original first few Paranormal Activities.
Oh, that's so right.
That was really cool to find out. I was like, oh my God, just a really nice, seemed like a normal work partner, at a class, and she turned out to have done a lot of cool things. So
that's really cool that she, despite already having some success, wanted to keep learning and doing more. And I think that's important for people, especially when you're working on your creativity, to never get to the point where you think you've reached your destination and you're the best. I mean, I've been a drummer for all my life, and I recently started taking lessons, and I don't think anybody's too old to keep learning and becoming more creative.
Well, definitely, and I think too that there's that phrase or saying about being a jack of all trades, but I don't think you truly can be a full jack of all trades, because you can always be learning new skills and hobbies.
Right. You can always keep learning about that stuff. Now, would you be willing to do one of your favorite voices for our listeners?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I think the easiest one, I might be a little rusty, it's been a while, but the easiest one to do for me is, and nobody can do it perfect like Jim Henson, I think.
Right.
I think everyone's got their own. It's like Arnold, everyone's got their own take on the impression, but I think one of the easiest, earliest things I learned to mimic, growing up watching a lot of Henson and Muppets and Sesame Street in the house with you as a kid, is
right.
I definitely latched on early to being able to do hi, Kermit the Frog here, coming to you live from Sesame Street. Or I can do
that's really good.
It's the Muppet Show with our very special guest, Malcolm.
I can see your flailing arms as you do that. What's the what's the guy from?
Doing that? Do you have a camera here?
Yes, we do. What's the guy from? I've heard you do somebody from Family Guy before. That's really good too.
So, Patrick Warburton, this really cool voice actor that I like. Caleb actually, my brother Caleb got to see him do stand up in Hollywood about a month or two ago. I was very jealous. That sounds awesome. But so he is, a lot of people know him as Joe from Family Guy or Kronk from Emperor's New Groove.
Oh man, he's the best.
But his voice is quite deeper range-wise than mine, so I can kind of do a couple lines in Joe's voice. I haven't quite figured how to talk full sentences in it, but it was kind of like it was kind of like a party trick. Like friends used to love. Like I would go to like a party in college, and people would go, "Yeah, do the voice, yeah." So I mean, I can kind of do like a Peter. It's hard to. Kronk is impossible for me to do. Not impossible, but I haven't figured it out yet because it's a steady, very deep, flat level voice. But Joe is a little easier for me to get into because he kind of has this weird thing where he talks and certain words crack, like his voice goes up and then dips down.
He's still
again.
Going through puberty.
So it's like a Peter. Bonnie and I are going to the clam.
Yeah, and I've got to ask you, Kronk, isn't he the guy in Emperor's New Groove that also speaks squirrel?
Yes, yeah, when he's like, oh, squeakity, squeak, squeaking.
That's a great one. Listen, you have such a better memory than I do. Recently, I think you heard the podcast I had with Victor Yared, and there was a point where he and I were talking about voiceover artists that, like Mel Blanc, that had done so many different voices, and he brought up one that we both couldn't remember. The guy that does the voice for Winnie the Pooh, but also the Python in the Jungle Book.
Yes, so Jim Cummings, really, really phenomenal. Like one of the best, probably I would say, Disney actors of all time. I mean, you definitely have to put Mel Blanc up there as far as animation, but for Disney, I mean, Jim Cummings, I could list about 10 million different things he's done from everyone's childhood, no matter what generation. I mean, he's done Darkwing Duck. He was Cat from Cat Dog. He's Tigger and Winnie the Pooh. He's, like you said, he's the snake from the Jungle Book.
And I mean, he's got, for everything he's done, he's got a pretty recognizable tone to his voice, right?
Right, yeah, and he's also Pete from Goofy's really mean neighbor that bullies him all the time, and he also, another big one that's really cool is it's pretty similar voice-wise, actually, now that I think about it, to the Snake from the Jungle Book. I believe he might have been some iteration of the Cheshire Cat as well.
Yeah, when he's the python in Jungle Book, he sings one of my favorite songs. Used to scare me as a kid, called Trust in Me. I remember I actually had the Golden Book, and I would be terrified by the page when his eyes were spinning, when he's hypnotizing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think everyone has one of those types of things as a kid. I mean, for me, I remember, for some strange reason, some of the music in Cats the Musical scared the hell out of me.
McCavity, I think that was one that scared me.
Yeah, it's very, very creepy, very menacing.
I think your grandparents took you to the show live.
Yeah, I got to see that on stage. That was phenomenal. Much better than the live action.
Yeah, I do not recommend the recent movie, and I don't think I'm offending anybody at all. So let's go to a different topic. Tell me about being a gamer and a sports enthusiast. I think we should probably divide those two. So let's start with video games. What part does creativity take in how you play and how you stay interested?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, to start off, I think my earliest memories of playing video games and really getting into them was at some point when I was about maybe 5 or 6 years old, if I'm remembering correctly. Mom actually had her old PlayStation 1, the very original the square box one.
Right.
And that was back when the lid popped open, and it was way different back then. But
PS1,
she gave me that. She gave me that because I think she just kind of lost interest or stopped playing video games eventually. And I remember one of the first games I ever played was the very original Tomb Raider. You guys got me this really awesome game that's still underrated, and a lot of people don't know about it, called Ape Escape. Yeah. And there was also a really cool game that you actually, one of the only video games you care for, is PaRappa the Rapper.
Oh my God. It is such a good game. With even the songs, I still remember crack, 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 the egg into the bowl.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people haven't heard of that one. One thing I loved about it is because I'm a drummer, you had to have good rhythm to rap and tap out the rhythms. And there were 6 levels that you had to get up to?
Yeah, pretty short to get through, but really fun. And there were little stars, too, in between the things you had to hit to the beat, and you could freestyle to them. And if it was good enough, your points would rack up, and then you could do, you rapping cool, and you would be up at the top, and you can just freestyle the whole rest of the level.
Such an awesome game. All right, so back to it. So you had PS1.
Right, I remember that, and then the first thing you guys got me, I remember, as far as getting me a thing, was I remember I had a really cool little portable Game Boy Color, and it was purple and see-through, and you could see through it and see all the circuits. So I remember playing Pokemon. Pokemon was a big one. Pokemon Red on that quite a bit. I had a really cool but very difficult, still never beat it to this day, a Ren and Stimpy game.
Right.
I had a Star Wars game and a Tony Hawk game on there. Really cool, really cool first little console to have. But I think that's how it started.
I have to interrupt you here to say, you grew up at the beginning of Pokemon, and I know I've told you this a million times, but I'll never forget taking you to the first Pokemon movie. And about 3 minutes into it, I realized there was going to be no dialogue. The only thing that ever occurred was Pika, and I was thinking to myself, what is going on here? Are these people on drugs?
Oh yeah, it's like a fever dream, I'm sure, for the parents. I mean, all of the Pokemon don't really speak English. They just know how to say their own name. It's very strange. So no matter what the name is, they just all have different voices. So you've got Pikachu, or you've got they don't really say much. So that's
and the Pokemon people. The Pokemon people went on to do fairly well for themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, if you think about it, they still make new games and they still make new shows. And I'm sure as a teacher, you see quite often kids still love it. I mean, after 20 plus years, it's still going strong.
Oh, my God. The Pokemon cards are notorious contraband at schools.
Oh yeah, those are very valuable to kids.
I'll tell you what happens and why they don't allow them at schools, and I got to clear this up. The big issue is kids bring them in, and then other kids bring those in, and then they want to trade, And then they get home. They get home and they realize they made a bad decision. And then a fight breaks out the next day. And then the parents get mad at each other, and we have to get the parents together to give the cards back.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was a big thing when I was a kid, too. I remember being in summer camp, and kids would be so serious. They would bring in a whole binder with laminated little, the little pocket square things for the cards. And I remember sitting at the table, and people would trade back and forth, and it was very serious. It was like, step into my office, please. I have a holographic Mewtwo, and I would like you to trade me your first generation Pikachu.
All right, so moving on from the Pokemon generation and then getting more into video games, becoming a little more serious.
Yeah, well, so I think to answer your question, as someone who has had a love for video games of all kinds since, like we talked about, I picked up a controller at about maybe age 6. There are definitely a lot of ways that creativity guides and influences me with gaming as well. I mean, when dealing with a difficult game or a difficult challenge in games, I have to go through trial and error, which usually involves studying patterns or things that I need to accomplish to get through that portion when I'm playing. Or when I'm playing a lot of fighting or action games or challenging things, there are a lot of boss fights or really difficult enemies that you have to fight that get increasingly difficult, and I kind of have to think outside of the norm and find different ways over and over and strategies and problem-solving skills to get to the next part of the game and finish what I'm stuck on.
Right, and why don't you name 2 to 3 of your current favorite video games to play, and what kind of system are you using these days?
Well, to answer the system question, right now I did upgrade to a pretty cool new full PC gaming setup. So I have been playing a lot of stuff on there, but outside of PC, I do play quite a bit of, I still have all my PlayStation stuff. So I still have, I've got a little library here, actually. I mean, I've got the PS3, the PS4, we have the PS5, and I also have some older consoles in storage as well, like the Nintendo 64,
right,
the Game Boy Advance, the Sega Dreamcast. So quite a bit to choose from. I always definitely have something to plug in and play. I've got a GameCube as well, which is really fun.
That's awesome. So how about 2 or 3 of your current favorite games to play?
Yeah, so right now, I think, something I always have installed on any console I have, it's timeless, is, you know a lot about this because of Caleb and I growing up, but I always replay one or some kind of the Kingdom Hearts games at some time. I'm always somewhere in a file replaying one of them. That's always been a big part of my life, so I would definitely still say Kingdom Hearts, and right now I'm playing the newest Final Fantasy 16 as well, which is really fun. I'm playing that on PS5, and a third one. I mean, replaying Fallout New Vegas right now on the computer. That new show came out, and I've always loved Fallout when I was younger up until now, and been a big fan, so that sparked my interest to replay another one of them. They did a great job with that show.
Yeah, I was just talking the most recent podcast with Ripley Rodriguez, and we were getting into Fallout and talking about the difference between the game and the show. And I might as well ask you, too, how do you think they did translating that into a show?
I think they did a phenomenal job, really. I mean, it's only the first season, and I think they already managed to stuff so much in there for the fans. But what I really appreciate is, aside from the really good music and the costuming and the set design and aesthetic and everything, I mean, they really did a great job with writing it in a way that is filled and chock full of Easter eggs and things that people like me that have played all of them will love and notice and freak out over. But someone, say, like you, who watched the show and you liked it as well, but you've never played one. So they did a great job at balancing the writing with something kind of like the Last of Us show. I thought they did a phenomenal job with that and that aspect as well, where even if you haven't played it, you'll still love it. If you've played it, you will also love it.
Yeah, your mom and I absolutely love both, and we have no knowledge of the games at all, so I totally agree.
Yeah.
Let's get over to the second part of the question. So I know you're an avid sports enthusiast. tell everybody which sports do you like to really follow, and what is it about watching sports and get into it? I mean, I think ever since we lived in Philadelphia for a couple of years, she just became overly serious about games. You're very intense about it, and it makes me think of when we lived in Philly because the people there are so serious about their sports. So tell us about your love of sports, like what got you into it. And you might want to mention the fact that I think I remember your grandfather and you seeing a lot of games together.
Right. Yeah, I do definitely attribute a lot of my interest in sports to my grandfather. That is true. We went to all sorts of stuff in upstate New York. I mean, the Rochester Red Wings, which is, a AAA minor league baseball team, great field and really fun to go to those. And we went to Rochester Americans games, which is the minor league hockey team in town. I remember going to indoor and outdoor lacrosse games with him, soccer games in Rochester. I mean, a Buffalo Bills game as a kid, which was really cool. I remember his law firm had extra tickets, and we got to sit up in the Jim Kelly suite.
Yes.
So lots of really cool food, and it was pouring rain, and so I was nice and safe inside with a buffet of food and monitors everywhere. Definitely.
I had one more question. Now that you're on the topic of the Buffalo Bills, is it true? Tell the listeners out there: does there exist a photo of you and some Buffalo Bills cheerleaders?
Yes, yeah, very, very serious photo. I'm kind of mean mugging the camera as if, I to tell everybody that I was quite the Mac Daddy.
All right, so go on. Your love of sports. Continue.
Right, so I definitely think it started with my grandfather taking me to games, but also as a kid, I mean, there were always people around that were wearing sports jerseys or playing sports and talking about sports. So it's just something collectively with people around me in my life that I kind of got swayed to getting into. And I think a lot of it does definitely come from my grandfather. I mean, you and Caleb and my mother don't really care about sports. So
True. To make it clear, we respect people that are into sports, but it's just not our cup of tea.
Yeah, and no disrespect to Philly, but I'm not going to go quite that crazy about sports. But I am.
Let's leave it there.
Right. But I definitely think I got into it that way, and I do. As an adult now, I love every sport, but my favorites personally to watch are hockey and football. And funny enough, living on the West Coast out here, you do get some hockey fans, but it's not really as prevalent fan base wise as the East Coast. Probably, obviously, because of the winter weather over there, and then over here it's very nice out. So you do have the teams, but people aren't really into ice skating and hockey as much out here.
Right, but let me ask you, speaking of teams that are out here, how did you get into the Mighty Ducks, and what did that have to do with you becoming a sports enthusiast? Yeah,
so I think as a kid growing up, I didn't really have any set teams that I liked, and for whatever reason, I didn't pick the local teams. And growing up with a family that didn't really have any stakes in sports, I kind of looked towards players I really enjoyed watching as a kid, and I kind of just stuck with those teams. It was kind of like sports players I looked up to, and then I just latched onto that team. And they've been my teams ever since. So, I mean...
I'm laughing because I remember how very, very serious you are about what you're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think that the Anaheim Mighty Ducks interest started because of the awesome 3 Disney movies. I still love and own all of them. Great movies if you love hockey. With Emilio Estevez as the coach. And there was a really goofy, wacky, animated Mighty Ducks cartoon on Disney when I was a kid that I do believe it was, they were like humanoid duck aliens that were sent to Earth from another planet to play hockey and save the world.
All right, I already want to see that.
So that was really cool. But the whole craze of that and just how awesome the Mighty Ducks jerseys were as a kid, I had to have one. And I remember my grandfather bought me one of the really cool, like the eggplant purple ones with the classic logo. And that's how I got into that. And now they aren't affiliated with Disney anymore. They're called just the Anaheim Ducks. But I still avidly follow them. For football, I did like a lot of the players on the Green Bay Packers growing up, and I loved the green and yellow colors. So
yeah,
I kind of latched onto that and stuck with that. There was a certain player that I liked growing up that we won't get into details here because he's done some things off the field that are quite unfortunate.
He's been canceled.
Yes. His name rhymes with Chet Favre, but we'll leave it there. That's all I have to say about that. But, and not to keep going on and on here, the other teams I do like is I liked players growing up on the Dallas Mavericks for basketball and formerly the Anaheim or the California Angels, now the Los Angeles Angels. So I've definitely got into all of those at a young age, and I do still follow all of them and watch the games. I mean, last year, my girlfriend Nicole and I drove up to Seattle to see a Seattle Mariners versus Angels game, so that was really cool. But
yeah, so you do still try to get out and see some games when you have time here and there.
Yeah.
And where you live in Tualatin, Oregon, you're not too far from Portland, correct?
Right, and Portland has the Trailblazers, which is a basketball team, and sadly they do not have a hockey or a football team, but Seattle has both of those, and that is just a 2 to 3 hour drive. So,
right. All right, we always end these interviews with a couple quotes, and I would love to hear your response to them. Today I've got 3 of them, so let's start out with one of my favorite authors. This guy was great. His name was Kurt Vonnegut. If you don't know who he is, one of the most famous books he wrote was called Slaughterhouse-Five. He said at one point, we have to continually be jumping off cliffs and developing our wings on the way down. What do you think he meant by that? Or what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good quote. I think not only is that a great quote, but I do think that I can relate to it very well as far as creativity and inspiration. As someone who takes a little bit mentally to kind of fully get that creative spark flowing to a point where I can do things or create it, I would say in a sense that it kind of takes a push or a leap of faith sometimes. You just kind of have to go for it and trial and error and improve along the way. And it always works out great, but you kind of have to take that push, kind of relating that quote there. And I do think that the coolest things come from when people put themselves in unfamiliar and even sometimes uncomfortable and uncharted territory. When you force yourself to dive in headfirst and go through trial and error when creating, I do think that you often end up coming out on the other side of things with all sorts of results that you never even thought you were capable of. I mean, the first step is the hardest, but I do think it gets better from there.
Totally agreed. Great answer. And I think a lot of artists and especially writers, when they're blanking out and they can't think of ideas, to just do something outside of the norm. I'm a drummer, but I might pick up a bass guitar or ukulele or something like that, and I'll come up with something totally different. So you're right. If you think outside of your comfort zone, you're going to come up with something really cool. Another author I really love, she's a female monk, written a lot of great books. Her name is Pema Chodron, and she said, "To be fully alive, fully human, and completely awake is to be continually thrown out of the nest. To live fully is to be always in no man's land. To experience each moment as completely new and fresh. To live is to be willing to die over and over again. From the awakened point of view, that's life." It's kind of similar to what Kurt said, but what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think that is very insightful, and also, like you said, a little bit similar to the Kurt Vonnegut quote there, but I do think it's a great one as well. And I think that kind of similarly to what I was saying about the other quote you gave me, you should always be willing to try new things to broaden your horizons, especially creatively. I mean, no man's land, I do think, is a perfect term for where you may find yourself when trying to wade into those explored creative waters, so to speak. And actually, do you mind if I give you a quote as well in return that kind of relates to this, that I think both you and I have heard and would appreciate?
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
So David Bowie once said, "If you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth, and when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting."
Yeah, I love David Bowie, and that's I always admired how he just kept changing. Way before Lady Gaga, way before Madonna, he kept going into no man's land. Certain times he went a little too far, but he always came up with good music. And even if you don't like all of it, there's so much that everybody could find something because he was willing to push himself. And
right, and like you said, a lot of people, I mean, definitely laid the groundwork and blueprints for a lot of that.
Totally agreed. Last quote is from Genndy Tartakovsky. Now, you and I are huge fans. Tell everybody really quick who he is and what special event you and I got to go to.
Yeah, so Genndy Tartakovsky is, in my opinion, at least in my time and generation, one of the best all-out writers, directors, and animators for Cartoon Network and all sorts of things. But he is known for Samurai Jack, Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Laboratory, Primal, the Clone Wars miniseries, which I avidly remember impatiently waiting for a once-a-week
2-minute episode, right?
Way back in the day when it was like a crappy, like the early stages of YouTube where it was very slow, and we would wait a whole week for a tiny little like snippet of more of the story.
Right. Yeah, so he made all these great animated shows and continues to. In fact, one that not everybody loves. I love the new Primal show too.
Yeah, no, I think I mentioned that one. That one's great. I haven't finished it yet. That's definitely on my list to rewatch and finish. But I love the artwork and the style. I mean, but the other thing you brought up there was we did get to go to a really cool event. I don't remember quite what year that was. Maybe it was 2017, 18, somewhere around there. It was whenever the newer chapters that finally finished Samurai Jack came out. After years, they were going to do a movie, and it had been in development hell back and forth, and they finally pushed out a final season. And
we went to a theater, right?
Yeah, so you and I got to go to a really cool theater downtown in Los Angeles, and we got to go to the premiere of the first 2 episodes of the final season of Samurai Jack, and I remember it was really cool. They had a giant ice sculpture in the lobby of Jack, which was really cool.
And Genndy came out, right, to talk to us.
Yeah, he came out. Not only did he come out, but he came out with Tom Kenny, famously known for SpongeBob and a million voices from my childhood.
Yes. I remember you going crazy.
Yeah, that guy's fantastic. But he did the Sammy Davis inspired character.
Yes. Oh my God, I was going to bring that up.
It was like the guy with the cool knives or whatever he throws, and he's like, "Yeah, come on, babe."
That was such a great character. If anybody likes Samurai Jack and you haven't seen the last season, it's worth it just for that guy.
Yeah.
So speaking of Genndy, at one point he said, "You want to go through life without regrets, right? Even with something like doing these shows, I've always wanted to work as much as I possibly can to make it as great as I could, so I could never look back and go like, oh, I wish I could have worked a week extra on that one. It was impossible." And I can say that all the way from the first short of Dexter's Laboratory, another great, great show.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that regarding creativity?
Well, definitely agree on that's a lot of good memories watching that with you growing up. I definitely think that I can apply that quote to myself in a lot of ways, but I think what I would have to say about that is that I certainly don't want to live my life with regrets, and that is something that becomes apparent the older that I get. And when I'm trying to express myself and be creative, when I'm trying to do my best at work, or when I'm doing anything in day-to-day life, I do have a desire to give 100%, and then some more on top of that. I do think that I want to leave everything all out there and take every chance and opportunity I have at utilizing it to my full potential, and that's something I always do strive to do. At times, I will say it does feel like I can never do enough compared to what my mind wants to accomplish. But however, I mean, that's that's why I have to continue just trying new things, pushing boundaries like we spoke about whenever I have the opportunity, and to never, ever stop using my imagination and my creativity in this life, regardless of what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And that actually makes me think of one of the reasons why we named you Django. I mean, perhaps we were looking into the future, but if anybody doesn't know, there was this incredible gypsy guitar player that lived in the 19th century named Django Reinhardt. And if you don't know about him, he's one of the best and fastest guitar players ever. Played a lot of jazz, but some of his fingers were burned in a fire. So if you look up some of the very rare Django Reinhardt videos on YouTube, you'll be blown away by his playing, but then you look at his left hand and you're like, oh my God, how does he do this? So with what you just said, here's a guy that could have quit, right, and given up. But in fact, that challenge that we've been talking about helped him go further than anybody ever will. I mean, there's never going to be anybody like Django Reinhardt because of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, that's a lot of hardships to face, not only from a personal standpoint, but to his career and his talent and ability and his skills and hobbies there. But what's crazy is obviously he was insanely talented before, but right after that, he's just as talented, and he was so incredibly talented that he's able to do all that with missing fingers and still, blow away 99% of the competition back then, which is just definitely very inspirational and awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to be a music teacher. I'm currently working with middle school kids, and they come in and tell me who they like, and I like a lot of stuff that kids listen to these days, but it is really an honor to play them old footage. And when I play a young guitar player a video of Django Reinhardt, they're like, what? A lot of times, it's someone like Django Reinhardt or Stevie Wonder who's blind, and some of the comments I get, they're like, oh, obviously auto-tune, or they're using Beat Detective, and I'm like, no, back then you had to be good or you were not going to be recorded, and right. So I think it's inspiring to people these days to go back and look at all the extra stuff we have now, and these people back then didn't do it, Beethoven going deaf, stuff like that. And there's just as many stories these days about people that have challenges that break through, and that's really the most important thing I think about creativity that we talked about today is don't let anything hold you back. You're never too old to start. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I definitely would agree. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have seen out there all sorts of things about how certain people we all look up to didn't know what to do, and at a certain age they got it. It's never too late. Good example is Harrison Ford was a carpenter until his early 30s, and look at him now. So no one would ever know that unless you look that up. That's crazy to know that.
Right, and I think I've told you about this too. One of my favorite guitar players, another one, Reeves Gabrels, didn't start becoming popular and playing on a world scale like he does now with until he was in his 40s, and his wife gave a cassette tape to David Bowie because she was a choreographer. And this guy went on to do with 2 decades with David Bowie, and now he plays for The Cure. So you never want to give up, right? Yeah,
that's a great story, and I totally agree with that.
All right, Django, this was great. Let's do it again soon.
All right, yes. So thank you for having me. This has been awesome, and I'm honored to be a part of this, and all the other episodes have been fantastic so far, so thank you for letting me be a part of this.
All right, I appreciate it. Love you. Talk to you soon.
All right, love you. Bye.